This is a Ducati Desert Sled. It's a retro scrambler that's both an on-road and an off-road bike, but today I want to find out if it's more on-road or off-road by taking it up a trail called Peru Creek, which goes to this really cool and now abandoned silver mine. So in this video, we're going to go both on-road and off-road, and we're going to find out just what the Desert Sled is. Is it a dirt bike that's good on-road, or is it an on-road bike that's good off-road? Now, if you've been watching this channel, you know that I used to own a KTM 690 Enduro, and I sold that for this. And this, I think, is a trade up because that was about a $9,000 bike. This one is $12,000. That was a single cylinder thumper. This is a dual cylinder, and of course, this one has all that Italian flair. So let's talk about it. Now, this 803cc dual cylinder Ducati puts out about 73 horsepower. It's mated to a 6-speed, of course, manual transmission, but for a tall rider like me, it fits me perfectly. It's got 9 inches of ground clearance and a 33-inch inseam height, which is perfect if you're both riding on the dirt or riding on the road. Now, both front and rear shock have 7.9 inches of travel. They're fully adjustable. I also have massive Brembo brakes, as one should on an Italian motorcycle, both front and back. I've got this wee little skid plate, which is a little worrisome, but probably the thing that's going to keep it the least off-road worthy are the tires. Those Pirellis are certainly more street biased than big old knobby off-road tires. I've got a 19-inch front wheel, I've got a 17-inch rear wheel, not ideal for off-roading, but I do have this really sexy exhaust that's kind of bobtailed. Some of the other cool features are this pinstriping. This is a 1-year-old model, so there are different colors available. Also, the red frame is, well, red, but perhaps the coolest part of this bike, yeah, I know this is silly, is this little front headlight guard. It just is a great throwback to scramblers of old. Now, like most throwback bikes, I've got this really cool and modern yet old school TFT, and it tells me the 4 bits of information very easily that I really care about, and that of course includes my speed limit, the tachometer, how much fuel I have, and what gear I'm in. Now, this license plate holder is kind of a very sporty looking model, which is grand. What's not so grand is that the fender ends right there, and when you take it on some dirt, this massive tire will throw up so much mud that your entire back will be coated with, well, mud. Now, before we hit the road to get the on-road portion of this review, you might be wondering, Roman, what's the biggest difference between the Ducati and the KTM? I'm not even sure people actually cross-shop them, but there are really 2 massive differences. First and foremost, this engine is actually oil/air-cooled, kind of like an old air-cooled Porsche 911, which means it runs a little hot. But then again, the KTM, even though it was water-cooled, also ran hot. But for me, the biggest difference is the seat. The KTM had that classic motocross, we don't want you sitting down on the bike when you're riding seat. This is plush and comfortable. I could spend, well, all day on this. You know, on-road, this is a very easy bike to ride, almost a beginner bike. The torque curve is nice and fat, so unlike my KTM, it doesn't actually snap, which is fine. I don't need that on the road. It also has a really tossable demeanor. So this bike weighs over 400 pounds, but it doesn't feel that heavy on the road. It really does a good job in masquerading or masking the weight of it. And that could be because of the way that the bike is built. It's just a very straightforward and, in a way, traditional form for a motorcycle. It makes it very easy to ride very quickly. Almost too easy to ride too quickly. The gear shifts are positive, so you're never trying to figure out what gear you're in. Plus the TFT here gives you big numbers, so you know what gear you're in. Overall, it's a bike I could spend a lot of time on. Now, of course, like any modern bike, this also has an off-road mode, which of course disengages the ABS, which is something that you want. On my old KTM, you had to disengage the ABS every time you turned the bike off, and I found myself going down a very steep, very rocky trail ones with the ABS on, and basically what happens in that case is the bike does not stop. So let's switch it into off-road mode and let's see what it's like when the pavement turns to dirt. Let's head up to this mine. Alright, I have found a couple issues when going off-road with the Desert Sled. First and foremost, I miss my big wheels. A little taller bike would be nice, especially when crossing the water, but I also find that this bike is very short and kind of stubby for somebody who's 6'2", and while that is great on-road, I kind of miss the length and tallness of the old KTM. It just feels a little bit more. Well, it's kind of like the difference between, let's say, taking a Jeep that's been lifted off-road and just a base Jeep. They can both go off-road, but the lifted one just feels much more, well, athletic and ready to tackle the hard stuff. Now, we haven't really tackled any hard stuff here. It's basically, a dirt road with some whoop-de-doos. The other thing I also miss immediately is kind of the sharp bite of the old knobbies. These are definitely much more street biased, and you can start to feel that when you're going over things like rocks in the water. But overall, I'm happy with it. If I wanted to do a lot more off-roading, I would certainly get a much more dedicated off-road bike. But if you want to do something that will be a lot of fun on-road and then can also take you off-road with a little bit of skill, then this is a perfect choice. So I'm very happy with this bike. I also, of course, have this channel, which means we get a lot of pure dirt bikes at the office. So part of my rationale was that I really didn't need a dedicated off-road bike. I could always get one and use that. One of my biggest complaints with the KTM was that every time I turn it off, let's face it, when you're kind of with your buddies off-road, you end up stopping a lot, adjusting things, getting drinks, checking things out, you turn it off, it would always default to turning the ABS back on, which was not good. So let's see what this guy does. I've never tried this before, so we'll turn it on and let's see if the ABS is off or on. And by the way, it's a lot easier to get your leg over this too. That is another plus as I get older. So let me see what's going on here. ABS is flicking. ABS on. So it did default back to being on. Alright, well, I'll just turn it off. Wait, ABS off. Alright, same issue. At least there's a big screen that tells me it's back on. Alright, so I started this review by asking a simple question. Is this bike everything you want in both a road and a dirt bike? And the answer is no. It's probably 70% road and 30% dirt. You run out of suspension, you run out of wheel size, you run out of tire tread. But that doesn't matter, because what does matter is that it's just a hoot to ride, and it will take you on the road less traveled to places like that. Check it out, an old abandoned silver mine. So if you're looking for a hoot of a bike around town, but one that's also capable of going off-road, I couldn't recommend a better one than the Ducati Desert Sled. All right, now that I've been following the camera car, I get to speed back at a much quicker pace. As always, this is Roman reporting for the Fast Lane Bike. Check out TFLbike.com for more news, views, and of course, Desert Sled Scrambler reviews. See you guys next time. Ciao.